Welcome to Tech Intersect. I'm your host, Tanya Evans, and my life and work exist at the heart of law, business, and technology. Yeah, I've earned a few fancy titles and degrees over the years, but the bottom line is I'm a writer, speaker, teacher, and lifelong learner, and I'm really excited that you've joined me on this journey. So what is Tech Intersect? Well, it's authentic, empowering conversations with really interesting guests who demystify complex topics to prepare you for the future, because your future is now. And it exists where law, business, and tech intersect. Get ready to listen, learn, and leverage. Let's get started. In this episode, Sports Illustrated legal analyst and contributor Professor Mike McCann and I discuss how pro athletes like NBA star Spencer Dinwiddie is leveraging his earning potential by issuing a cryptocurrency to tokenize his earnings and to engage fans and investors directly. We also talked about when and how scholarship athletes might actually benefit financially on their own name, image, and likeness. As a former professional athlete and scholarship athlete, the topic is near and dear to my heart. I learned a lot and hope you will too. Let's get started. Okay, so I am really excited today on this episode of Tech Intersect to connect with someone who I have a great deal of respect and adoration for. Michael McCann is joining us. He's an attorney. He's a UNH Franklin Pierce School of Law professor. He's the founding director of the UNH Sports and Entertainment Law Institute. He's the Sports Illustrated and SI.com legal analyst, and he's also my colleague, my friend, and my immediate predecessor in the Associate Dean for Academic Affairs seat, where he served from 2017 to 2019. Mike, I want to welcome you. I'm so happy that you answered the call affirmatively to join me and have this amazing conversation about the intersection of sports, blockchain, all sorts of things. So welcome.
Well, thank you, Tony. Thanks for having me, and thank you for the kind introduction. This is a transformative era in the space of sports and the law, particularly related to technology, financial instruments, and how people are compensated. There's no better time to have this conversation. So I'm very excited to be on your podcast.
And you are absolutely right. There's so much going on in the space. It's really exciting. I feel like it changes every day, both on the sports side, as you said, the business, finances, and this emerging technology of blockchain, crypto assets. We're going to get into all of it. And we finally found a topic that intersects with all of the things that we love. So I'm ready to jump right in. And I think I'm going to learn a lot about you in the process of this, even though we see each other all the time. I like to start with a bit about your background in sports and how you came to be the Sports Illustrated legal analyst and some of your work in that area.
Sure. So when I was in law school, I wrote a note for this Virginia Sports and Entertainment Law Journal, and I wrote it on a topic that I've always been passionate about, which is the NBA draft. I'm from a suburb of Boston, and I know the Celtics. I grew up as a big Celtics fan, and the Celtics were bad in the 1990s, and as a result, they would often get the top pick because of the way the NBA draft works. So fast forward to 2001, I'm a summer associate at a law firm, and I hear Dick Vitale on ESPN say, it's a big mistake. These kids are skipping college for the NBA. And I thought, I don't think that's right. Actually, I think the ones that have done it, Kobe Bryant, Kevin Garnett, Tracy McGrady, several others, have actually done really well. So I go back to law school my 3L year. I take a sports law class with Donald Dell. He was at one point Michael Jordan's agent, and he was an adjunct professor at the school. And I wrote a paper for his class, and I published it. I argued that it would be illegal for the NBA to prohibit players from going from high school to the NBA directly, that it'd have to be collectively bargained. And even then, I wasn't certain that it would be legal. And as you know, with academic stuff, nobody really reads it. Like my brother read it. I'm pretty sure about that. My mother said she read it. I'm less sure about that. And I go on. I practice law in Boston, and then a couple years in, a football player at Ohio State named Maurice Clarett files an antitrust lawsuit over the NFL's age eligibility rule. And my brother, Bill, said, hey, why don't you send that thing you wrote to Clarett's lawyer? And I said, come on, well, he's not going to look at it. I'm just some random lawyer dude, right?
Yeah.
Like, what does he care? So I sent it to him. Alan Milstein is his lawyer. And Alan Milstein, I knew, super prominent. You just met him, right? When in Durham.
Oh, yes.
That's him. So he is Allen Iverson's attorney,
Yes.
attorney to Carmelo Anthony, like a superstar sports attorney.
Right.
And I sent it to him, and he goes, "Oh, this is interesting." And he had me join the legal team. So I responded to work for Alan Milstein for a year, whatever it was, and we didn't win the case, but that got me into the sports law world. And then I become a law professor. 2007, I get an interview request from Sports Illustrated saying, "Can you comment on the legal impact of the racist comments that Don Imus said about women basketball players from Rutgers?"
Right.
And
I remember that.
Remember that? So I said, sure. So it was a very straightforward defamation interview. And then later that day, the editor at Sports Illustrated, BJ Schechter, contacted me to say, our person has left for ESPN. We have an opening to be a legal analyst. And 920 articles later,
Wow.
13 years later, I've been with Sports Illustrated. My roles, as you know, has grown a lot over that time. But that's how I got into it. I always tell my students, like, I like to pretend that I was a good athlete. I wasn't. I wasn't anything. I wasn't an agent. I wasn't Mr. Charisma or anything, but I wrote a lot. And
Right.
I wrote that paper in law school, and I published it as a note. And that gave me some currency. And it was fortuitous that a player brought a similar lawsuit, but that was my pathway in. So I tell students, write a lot when you're in law school. You never know what can happen.
I agree. When I was in law school, I wrote I was the editor of the journal. And so because I knew people, I was able to publish myself. And my first law review article was about the intersection of race and gender in the context of intercollegiate athletics. And obviously, as a Black woman who is a former not only scholarship athlete, but then also a professional tennis player, I was able to combine the things that I knew the best and then to look at it through a legal lens. And I still get queries about that all the time. I often wondered if now would be a great time to revisit it, to an update, where are we now type of thing. But that's the type of evergreen content. And you just never know, as you said, you absolutely never know when someone, a judge, a clerk, an attorney is looking for a different way to see things and to make a legal argument. So that's the whole reason to publish. And it doesn't hurt when you're looking for a job either.
That's right. That's exactly right. I mean, talk about distinguishing oneself. You had that article. I had the article I wrote. It's one way of really making a law student. Let's face it, it's hard to distinguish yourself as a law student. There are a ton of law students and lots of law schools, and people on paper look kind of similar often. And publishing a note can be a game changer because it really shows that somebody spent time and was passionate about a legal topic and investigated it and wrote something that was good and innovative, probably. So, yeah, it's a great opportunity. Also, like, when you're in law school, that's the time to do it because you go out to practice. It's really hard to write. So, you got to take advantage of the time when you're there.
Absolutely. And that actually reminds me, so you founded the UNH Law Sports and Entertainment Law Institute. Tell us a bit about how that came to be and some of the work that you do with the Institute.
Sure. So I was teaching at Vermont Law School, where I started the sports law center there. And I got UNH offered me a visiting slot. And that was maybe 7 years ago, I guess. And so I'm teaching at UNH Law as a visitor. And then they offered me, John Broderick was the dean of the school and Jordan Budd was the associate dean. And they offered me a chance to join the faculty. And they said, we'd love to have somebody come in and build a center and have it be focused on sports and entertainment law. And it's been a great 7 years since. We've raised money, and we have also been able to host some really incredible events. Lots of people are involved. with the Institute. And
Right.
Among the events would be Ed O'Bannon, the former
Yes.
UCLA basketball player who took on the NCAA. His first appearance after his case ended was at UNH Law. We have had a number of events involving the Colin Kaepernick's dispute. We've also done intellectual property and entertainment events, including the band The Slants came. They had the case against involving their name and trademark law. They came and performed. We have had other events, including related to video game law. So it has been a really fun field. And the cool thing about sports entertainment law is that it all kind of blends together. I mean, just take esports, right? Like esports, watching somebody play a video game, that now can be monetized. I mean, that to me is a real illustration of where those fields connect.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's just, who knows where we are going to go from here? Actually, we'll get to the blockchain aspects in a moment as well. But there's so many different types of technologies that are facilitating increased fan participation, which has been waning in recent years by all the majors. It's happened in NFL, NBA, certainly baseball. Saw some numbers across the board, and the drop in engagement probably has at least something to do with the technology and having your own ginormous screen, your own bathroom, your own beer, your own food, and you can stay home and almost feel like you're there without going to a stadium, for example. And so finding out ways to re-engage fans, not only for the live events, but also you can have multiple streams and multiple opportunities for money-making ventures, to be sure. So you're spot on there.
And, that's interesting you raise that, because I've done some work, not lately, but in recent years, for a company called Your Call Football. And they are a sports league. They're a pro football league where the fans call plays on their phones. They vote on the plays. So that's, that just captures everything you just mentioned, really. The interactivity, kind of the fan investment into the fan can do it from home. It's a league that's trying to sort of take advantage of the way as fans, we're consuming sports. And like you said, it's easier to stay at home in many cases. Right. I mean, look at how the high quality of an NFL broadcast. Right. If you're in a stadium, you don't see that replay necessarily. The camera angle isn't. If your line of sight isn't necessarily as good as a camera angle. So it's really changing. And what does that mean? Does that mean people will go to fewer games but watch more on TV? And are they going to stream them on their computer? How do leagues prevent unlawful streaming? I mean, the issues are just growing.
Right. Absolutely. And so that would, be incumbent upon them to find different ways to engage, because if we take a page out of the entertainment industry and the music industry and how alienating their very hard stance on peer-to-peer technology and streaming and ripping and all the other things that were going on in the late 90s, early 20s. And instead of embracing it, they really put the kibosh on listeners and users. And it really turned a generation of users and fans against the industry. And so I hopefully sports can take a page out of that book.
That's a great point. That's spot on. That's a great lesson that should be heeded. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned Ed O'Bannon, and that takes me to one of the two main topics that I wanted to cover with you. You have this unique position with your friendship and co-authoring the book that you've done. I want you to talk about the book. And it also ties in really nicely with the recent statement by the NCAA as they are considering maybe the possibility of someday allowing college athletes to benefit, quote unquote, from their name, likeness, and image. And a lot of that goes back to the great work that Ed did. So for those who don't know who he is and his story, you mentioned the case. Could you tell the listeners a little bit about that?
You got it. Sure. So Ed O'Bannon is one of the greatest college basketball players of all time. He played at UCLA. He won a national title in the mid-90s. He was College Basketball Player of the Year. He was the number one recruit out of high school. Just super distinguished, really a team leader type as well. And he went to the NBA. He was a lottery pick. He played several years in the league, then went on to play in Europe. He did very well financially on the court. he retires and he's in his mid-30s. This is now 2009. And a buddy of his says to him, "Hey, Ed, my son is playing this video game and you're in it." And, and Ed said, "Oh, that's cool, right? I mean, it's kind of flattering." And he's like, "Oh, yeah, you're the best player in the game. It's this college basketball game where they have classic teams." So he goes over his friend's house, and the friend's son puts the game in, and Ed is there. It's his height. He's 6'9". His race. He's African American. His jersey number. His hometown. The fact that he's the best player, right? So now it's not Ed O'Bannon. The publisher of the game, EA Sports, omits his name, but includes basically everything else. Now, interesting, later on in pretrial discovery, it was learned that the video game publisher had the names in there, and then they stripped them before publication, but they permitted people, users, to be able to edit the game so that you could like type in the player's name and then the announcer would say it. So it was kind of an end around. So Ed found it really interesting, and then as time went on, he thought, it's kind of weird that I'm in this video game and nobody ever came to me to ask for my permission. He's not looking for money, but he didn't get anything from it. And his friend says, "Hey, my son paid $60 for this game."
That got his attention.
Yeah, right? Like he's just a normal person. So that led to a case against the NCAA. It involved Sonny Vaccaro, was a well-known shoe executive. Ed sort of got connected to Sonny Vaccaro. They bring a case against the NCAA and Electronic Arts. It goes on for about 8 years. He reaches, and also he brought this case knowing he wasn't going to get paid anything. People think, oh, he was just doing it for money. He was doing it to change rules so that other players could benefit. He wasn't looking for money. He's fine financially. Life is good if you're a retired player who saved money, and he wasn't doing it for really. He probably lost money if you think of the value of time and that he's traveling to advance the case. So basically, he strikes a settlement with Electronic Arts. They agree to pay out about $40 to $60 million. Every player that was in these games got, I think, between about $1,600 and $7,000, depending upon the number of games they were in. The NCAA, though, doesn't settle, and they go to court. It's in the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of California out in Oakland. This is 2014. I go out there to cover the trial for Sports Illustrated. While I'm out there, I have dinner with Ed and sort of hit it off. And I say to him, "Hey, Ed, when this whole thing's over, would you commit to coming out to New Hampshire?" Because I would say, "Hey, have you ever been to New Hampshire?" And, of course, people say no to that, right? Most people haven't been to New Hampshire. So you kind of trap them when you do that. And he's like, "Oh, sure, that'll be my first spot." So, and he lived up to it. He totally lived up to it. He came out. So the case, he wins the trial. It goes on to appeal. The Ninth Circuit affirms the district court's ruling. The Ninth Circuit, however, modifies the remedy, and very basically, as long as schools provide the full cost of attendance, they comply with the antitrust remedy. They already did that because of the O'Bannon case, so it didn't allow for players to get paid for their name, image, and likeness. And that goes to your other point, this new period we're in where California has passed the Fair Pay to Play Act, which starting in 2023, college players in California will be able to license their use of their name, image, and likeness. The NCAA will likely challenge it in court on interstate commerce grounds. Other states are looking to do the same: Florida, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, New York, Midwest states as well. And the NCAA, as you referenced, Tanya, recently had a statement saying that they're committed to eventually providing players an opportunity to benefit from the use of their name, image, likeness.
Word of that,
right? Like benefit. Right. What is a benefit mean? Pay, or does it mean you get some kind of debit card that you can use at the bookstore? Right. I mean, and also, when do you get to use it? Do you only get it after you're done college? So there are all these possibilities that are not pay. So we'll see what it means, and that's kind of the era we're in right now. It's really a unique time, and there may be federal there's already a federal bill on this, and there may be others coming soon.
You love listening to podcasts, but have you ever thought about starting your own podcast? Maybe you want to build a brand, grow your business, or are looking for an excuse to talk about your favorite hobby. Whatever your reason for making a podcast, Buzzsprout is the place to start. Since 2009, Buzzsprout has helped over 300,000 people launch their own podcasts. Buzzsprout walks you step by step through the whole process and will give you powerful tools to start, grow, and monetize your podcast. Ready to get started? Click the link in the show notes to get our free step-by-step guide to starting your podcast today.
We hope you're enjoying this edition of Tech Intersect. Our conversation will continue in a moment, but first, a word on an exciting opportunity.
The Tech Intersect podcast is released to the public every Friday. And as an Advantage Evans member, you'll receive VIP first listen access as early as 48 hours before the public and exclusive subscriber content. We're talking worksheets and ebooks, curated links, media, topic-specific content. Premium members are also invited to monthly free AMA chats with yours truly, and AMA stands for Ask Me Anything. We'll talk about the episodes, and I may also include a few special guests. Pro members receive all of that, plus AMA replay access. Advantage Evans membership adds substantial value to your listen, learn, and leverage podcast experience. And there are 3 ways to take advantage, see what I did right there, advantage of all that the Tech Intersect podcast has to offer. So subscribe now for as little as $5 per month. Cancel at any time. Find out how to get started at techintersectpodcast.com.
And now, back to the conversation.
It's really, really fascinating because this has been a topic, as you've said, it really took hold at that time. That was the tipping point where we moved into, and this kind of gets at the point of Tech Intersect, right? You have technology, business, law, and at some point they all collide. And usually it's technology that's pushing business and law. Sometimes pushing, sometimes pulling, sometimes dragging.
Right.
But there's some technological advance, and it calls into question the way things have always been done. It calls into question what legacy systems and processes and entities, how they interact, because at the end of the day, business is all about relationships anyway. And technology often challenges the way relationships are formed as it relates to making money at the end of the day, really. So this will be really interesting to track. Where do you think we're going with this? What's the outlook? What's the prognosis of this patient?
I do think players will get the right to license the use of their name, image, and likeness, because I also think most people support it, honestly. Absolutely. Because it isn't about they're not becoming employees of the school. The university doesn't have to pay them anything. The money is between the players and the video game company, the trading card company, the sports camp that they can sponsor, the apparel company. And while O'Bannon's a former men's college basketball star who played in the NBA, there are all sorts of athletes who don't become pro athletes. I mean, think of all the sports you went on to play pro tennis for years, but a lot of sports, there isn't a pro avenue. I mean, volleyball, track, swimming, right? Their peak marketability is while in college. And for them, they really should benefit, I think many would say, while they're in school from the use of their name, image, and likeness. So I do think that my guess is that, if I had to play it out, to be honest, a federal legislation would make the most sense, because I think the state laws are going to be vulnerable to interstate commerce challenges, specifically the Commerce Clause. So my guess is that a federal bill is sort of the impetus behind the NCAA changing its rule. But I don't think it's going to be resolved soon. I mean, I don't think we're looking at a year or two. I think we're looking at maybe 3-5 years. This could be tied up in courts for a while. But I also think it's a topic where if the NCAA is smart, they're not going to fight this war.
Right.
This is not college players becoming employees. It's not them getting paid by their schools. This is the relationship with others. And like you nailed it. The new technologies are changing how people are compensated. And if the NCAA doesn't address this now, it's only going to become more of an issue. And also there's the optics where some college coaches can make $10 million a year.
Right.
right?
Right.
I mean, what schools do is they spend money on everything around the athlete, but not herself or himself,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, that's how they recruit. They hire Nick Saban for $10 million. They build a pro stadium that's hundreds of millions of dollars. They do all these things. It's like the orbit. The athlete is the sun, and everything is going around the athlete. Well, why not let the athlete get something as part of it too?
Right. Well, time will tell. We'll keep tracking this. We will connect again every time something comes up. Let's hop on here and have a conversation to say, where are we and where are we going? I think that conversation sets up the stage really nicely for what I'd like to transition into. And then I'm going to circle back to the points you made about the window of opportunity that a college athlete has to make money off of their name, likeness, and image for 99% of people who are not going to go on to pro sports. Or even if you do like me, it's spending most of the time at the satellite and challenger levels trying to earn enough points or to win the right tournament. As thankfully I did in 93 to win a national tournament and get a wild card into the qualifying rounds of the US Open. But that wasn't guaranteed.
Right.
And,
That's right.
and so the value of the name, the likeness and image usually resides at the college level for most. And then I think of minor league baseball. And so technically speaking, they're in the farm leagues trying to make it, or maybe you're playing basketball overseas there. And that happens for the WNBA for sure. Their contracts, my goodness, they're not getting paid anything, honestly.
That's right.
And so the ability for them to really make money off of their right of publicity rights is really the sweet spot. And that's what makes many things. I'm excited about what Spencer Dinwiddie is doing. You wrote a fantastic article recently for Sports Illustrated that explored what Spencer Dinwiddie is doing, his intention to leverage a blockchain platform. We'll talk a little bit more about that in order to convert a portion of his contract earnings into a security, some type of debt instrument, right? To incentivize and reward investors who give him some money up front in the hope that they get a nice rate of return when the third year of his contract vests. And so let's unpack all of that. Don't worry about the crypto side. I want to first actually just talk about Spencer Dinwiddie. What I have learned about him and reading and listening to a fantastic podcast between him and Anthony Pompiano, we call him Pomp in the crypto space, where I got the chance to learn a little bit more about him and his whole history and how smart he is, and his family is really interesting. So I wonder if just talking about who he is, what team he plays for, and kind of set the stage for the next part of, and the main part of the article that deals with what he is doing to kind of revolutionize the relationship between an athlete, contract, and the fans.
Yeah, so Spencer Dinwiddie is really a transformative figure, as you noted, in professional sports. He's pursuing something that hasn't been done before, and that I think has put the NBA in sort of a tough position because they don't know really how to deal with it. And his background is he's 26 years old. He played at the University of Colorado Boulder. He was an outstanding college player who, though, suffered an injury that caused him to drop in the NBA draft to the second round back in 2014. He has gone on to have a very good NBA career. He's having a terrific season this year for the Nets. He's averaging, I believe, about 19 points per game. Wow. So he's a strong player, 6'6". He's also seen as a team leader and well-liked and very thoughtful. He's always been somebody that has impressed people in terms of his personality. In fact, if one reads the pre-draft profiles of players, what stood out with him was that he is someone that was sort of kind of a cut ahead. I mean, he was really very bright. He impressed teams in interviews. So, he's obviously not Michael Jordan. He's not LeBron James in terms of basketball ability, but he's an excellent player. And he also, maybe whatever he lacks in superstar basketball talent, he certainly makes up for in other ways, including his brain, really. So he signed a 3-year contract with the Nets that's worth $34 million. As you said, Tanya, he wants to allow people to invest in it so that they would be paid back their principal plus interest. he would get money up front that he could then use to invest in other things. So his contract would be the security, and it would be used as a way of justifying selling security interests in it. And obviously the NBA's concern is that they believe it's sort of transferring his right to pay to others. He argues it's not transferring his right to pay, that all it is just providing a security. And we can talk about that, but it's something that no one else has done. So it's really unique, and give him credit. I think just he's trying something different. He's trying to make more money than he's getting paid, essentially. But there's risk to it, right? I mean, players can get hurt. Players can get in trouble, including people that never get in trouble before sometimes get in trouble for all sorts of things. So even though it's a guaranteed contract, it's not totally guaranteed, but that's part of the risk of any investment.
Right. Absolutely. Well, so let's talk about the NBA's beef, and then I might move to just more of the one-on-one basics about the plan as I try to unpack it. I'm glad that you're here with me, and we'll unpack it together. But what I understand of the NBA's beef with this, and you alluded to it a bit earlier, is the concern, as I understand it, of paying an entity other than the player or some pass-through entity that really is the player, that's their concern, that they are referencing the collective bargaining agreement and a specific part which says that no player shall assign or otherwise transfer to any third party his right to receive compensation. So how is Spencer getting around that language?
Yeah, so it is an issue for him because, as you mentioned, the CBA, Article 2 of the CBA, and leagues are going to enforce the CBA, the letter of the law. It's their employment agreement. If they don't do it, then they essentially lose a right. So the NBA, as you noted, cites the prohibition on players assigning or transferring to a third party their right to compensation under an employment contract. And the NBA argues that this is exactly that, because the third party would be this other person, the investor, and the league doesn't have a legal relationship with the investor. Also, the NBA likely has concerns about the possibility that if the investment doesn't work, could the league or Dinwiddie's team be sued as part of the transaction? It's, I guess, in theory, possible. Also, that they don't, right? I mean, and they don't really know. There are a lot of entities involved in the transaction that they don't have a relationship with. They don't have a contractual relationship with. I think that concerns them. And the NBA, of course, this is kind of a tricky era for the NBA. They had, as we know, some issues with China, and particularly how the league responded to a tweet about protests in Hong Kong. It's a disruptive time in that sense. So they may be a little bit on the risk-averse side. And I think the league, frankly, they haven't said this, but I'm guessing they want to know what they get out of this. Right?
That's right.
Right? Like, what do they, fine, Dinwiddie can make some money potentially, but why does the NBA want to acquiesce to this if they're not going to get paid out of it? And I think those are the concerns. But Dinwiddie, as you noted, he isn't really technically transferring a right, I would say. I think he's using the right to be paid as a security instrument. So, investors aren't really getting a right to the Nets or the NBA. They're getting a right to be paid. And from that lens, I think he can argue with some persuasion that the relationship is really between the investor and him, and the companies involved in the security interest. Whereas the contract itself, the employment contract, they don't have a right to that per se. They have a right to get paid from him or the security interest. So, it's interesting. The league could punish him. The league has the right under other portions of the CBA. There's also the Article 35 of the league constitution, which allows the commissioner to punish for any conduct that he considers prejudicial or detrimental to the NBA. Mm-hmm. And the league, from what I understand, has retained outside counsel to look at this. So we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting because I liken it to, so let me break down exactly the way that this thing is set up. So as you said, Dinwiddie has a 3-year contract. First 2 years, we have 10 million plus, year 2, 11 plus, year 3 is his option, 12 plus, right?
That's right.
And so after that second year, he can dump the third year if he thinks that he can get more out there as well. And as you said, getting people to, and let me take a step back to also say where I think the NBA has a huge problem is that they can't tell a player what to do with money once they have it.
Right. That's right.
Once he has it, you can't tell them what car to buy, what house to buy or not to buy, what investment to do. He can buy $34 million. Well, he's not, $10 million in that first year worth of Bitcoin if he wanted to. There's nothing to stop him from doing that. And using that to fund the second layer. And so he's actually receiving either him or a single pass-through entity at that level before you even get to the tokenization of his earning power, really. It's really his earning power that, as you said, is guaranteed by the fact that he has transparency of what his contract is. And so from a securities and exchange point of view, that's what we're always worried about, people not knowing what they're getting themselves into, right? And the magic will be in the details of how he sets it up. But presumably the token would be locked up for a couple of years. They're earning interest, waiting for what the magic might happen in that third year. So either they're going to get there, as I understand it, there's a minimum investment of $150,000. And roughly we're talking about 13 million because it's not leveraging all, 34 million, but 40% of that. So we have like this $13 million paying interest for the first 2 years, splitting net revenues at the end. And so that could really be some great upside, but fans are getting exposure to his earnings, which could, and we're really just focused on earnings. We could have a full other conversation about endorsements. Presumably he could do the same thing with his endorsement money, which we know is 10 times more sometimes in some cases when you're thinking of, the Roger Federers and the LeBrons of the world. That's where you make your real money.
It's a great point. You're totally right, because let's face it, his profile is rising because of this, and also he's having a great year. Like he is, and as you noted, the investor, let's play it out. Let's say he continues to play really well under this contract. He's going to be positioned for a much bigger deal in a couple of years. So Absolutely. They would presumably, gain a right to have first access to that. He could make a lot of money out of this, and his investors could make a lot of money. And especially if it's linked to endorsement potential. And there, I can't see the NBA having any grounds, right? If he does an endorsement deal with Electronic Arts or whatever, that's between him and that company.
Right. And that's even more removed. And I think that scares the heck out of them. Because what are they are so used to being the intermediary who is really, as I heard Spencer describe it, the broker between the fan who is setting whatever the value would be and the athlete. And so there's this intermediary, and that's the whole point of blockchain technology, of removing or disintermediating, and so that there's a peer-to-peer or person-to-person or entity-to-entity without someone or some entity in the middle exacting a premium because they are the trusted party in between the two. It's revolutionary. It's really game-changing, no pun intended.
No, you're right. And, the NBA could pivot on this and say, you know what? This is great. We're going to empower players, right? I mean, they could, because if they figure they're going to lose eventually on it, they might as well just claim a win and embrace it. And, they probably figure very few players will initially try this because it's so revolutionary. And, maybe they'll get something out of it, but I think it's inevitable. So I think we've seen in any context, when change is inevitable, you're better off embracing it rather than fighting it.
Absolutely. So well said, especially because the idea is he's, using himself as an example. He's already out there. I know that players love it, but he's like, all right, stand back, let me do this and we'll figure it out. But also his platform, and the name of the token is the Professional Athlete Interest Token, or paint. Yeah. I love that, going hard in the paint, right? There's so much you could do that's very exciting, but setting it up so that other athletes can do it as well. And this is the connection back to what we were talking about earlier. having a setup like this, and I've seen it I'll drop it in the show notes because I don't have it in front of me right now, but there is some type of minor league setup. It's not a blockchain based setup, but it is some type of participation with revenues. And it's basically the same business form, just using a more traditional model, and not only empowering one individual, but an entire class of athletes that focuses specifically on minor league baseball athletes. And so that takes us back to what the opportunities would be for a college athlete. For women's sports, it seems particularly empowering. And so I just see we haven't heard the last of it. And it's a really exciting time if all of this bears itself out well for athletes.
That's a great point. And even if athletes can't, even if they're not employees, they can still be part of a trade association that handles those issues, right? That looks out for them and empowers them. And if they're 18, 19 years old, this stuff may be over their head. It would be when I was 18 or 19, but have a trade association handle those issues and try to empower them through this new technology and this new way of doing financial transactions.
Absolutely. Well, I don't think there's any better way to end than you tied it up neatly in a bow. I don't even have to say any more about it. I could keep you here all night, but I'm going to honor your time and say thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Tech Intersect. I appreciate you, and you're welcome on these airwaves anytime.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a great conversation. I'm looking forward to coming on again. Great.
We covered a lot of ground in this in-depth interview about blockchain and crypto assets uses in sports. And I'm so impressed by what Spencer Dinwiddie is doing, not only for himself, but for pro ballers, pro athletes, and even or especially those who may never reach the upper echelon, but those who could still leverage their earning potential by issuing a security token or other crypto asset to otherwise engage fans and investors directly. We also talked about when and how scholarship athletes might actually benefit financially on their name, image, and likeness. Given trailblazers like Ed O'Bannon, the mega millions that schools make off the backs of the athletes who compete under their names, and the public support for these athletes to receive some economic benefit, I hope it's not a matter of if, but when they truly and meaningfully participate in the upside of the value they generate for schools and the NC2As. As a former scholarship athlete and former professional tennis player, this topic is obviously near and dear to my heart. I look forward to connecting with Advantage Evans members to talk about my experiences and thoughts, and to share some curated content to take a deeper dive. There's lots to cover in this topic, and we'll keep a close eye on any developments. Thanks for joining me.
Stay in touch with host Tanya Evans via your favorite social media. On Twitter at TechIntersect, and on Instagram via the handle TechIntersect. This podcast has been produced by Stephanie Renee for Soul Sanctuary Incorporated.